In this session, we're going to talk about a two-dimensional array. We've already seen in the previous session what a single-dimensional array means, and I also told you when I talked about arrays that a two-dimensional array will come with two subscripts. We're going to see an example and a sample program just to get an idea of a two-dimensional array. A two-dimensional array comes with two subscripts. So here I've mentioned it as two-dimensional array, but you can simply name it as a multi-dimensional array also, because anything equal to 2 or more than 2 is a multi-dimensional stuff. Now I am declaring the array name with two subscripts, or in other words, two square brackets, and I'm creating an object with a data type name. The first subscript will denote the row and the second subscript will denote the column. So when you run this kind of a program, what will you get? You will get values in the form of a table or a matrix. In other words, it will be a grid. This is how you declare an array. Integer array. You can use also a string, float, double, no issues. The array has two subscripts, and I've created an object int of, and I'm passing the value that I want. It's 4, 4, right? This can be read by using a nested for loop for storing the values in a multidimensional array. So the first for loop will constitute the rows, and the second for loop or the nested for loop will constitute the columns. So while reading it, you can also do the same. You can read the rows and columns and then simply print it out. An example, like say for example, the row is 5 and the column is 2, then this is how your matrix will look like, and what you see is the index value of the rows and the columns. This table will be a very good exercise for you to note as to how arrays work. So keep looking at the slide for some more time for better understanding as to how arrays are formed. It's time for us to see some sample programs. This is an example of a two-dimensional array. In this program, I have done the matrix in a static method. In other words, the program is predefined and the output that you get will be something that is beyond the control of the user, because it's the programmer's haven to give values static. Now if you see in this program, I have an integer with a value of 1 and the name of the integer is x. Now I've declared a variable, I'm an array, a two-dimensional array, int a with two subscripts. I've created an object and I've passed values of 3 by 3. Now I'm going to read it with this particular for loop, and this loop is for the rows. So for int I is equal to 0, I less than a dot length, that is the row length, I plus plus. You can see that the number of rows are 3, which is 0, 1 and 2, and that is what this a dot length means. Then I open the curly braces. Now you see I have a nested for loop once again for the columns, and if you in this particular for loop I've initialized j as 0 and j less than a of I dot length, which means the number of columns in each row. That is why a of I dot length I have given it as, and of course the j increment for the columns. And now look at this particular line. I have incremented the value of 1 with x plus plus. You can remember that when we saw the for loop, we had run a similar program, and in that I would have pre-incremented x, but here I have passed the values of a of I and j as x plus plus. So the first one will be printed, and only then this x plus plus, that is 2, 3, 4, all these numbers will be printed. And now if you see, for every row, that is a of I, that is the first row, and in that first row we'll have 3 columns. Therefore, after the 3 columns, each and every digit will be spaced with a tab. And here you can see I have gone on to the next line. For this particular for loop, I have just put a system.out.println, which means the program will go to the next line and start printing the second row of the matrix. Once the second row is over, that is the 3 columns have been printed, then it naturally this will once again work, and your program will go to the third line and the third row will be printed with 3 columns. Shall we run this program? I first compile this program. Yes, and now I execute this program. There you see on the screen the values of the matrix. But suppose the user wants to add his own values in the matrix. It could be in the form of a table wherein the columns can denote like the employee name, the employee number, and maybe his salary, and the rows could be for the corresponding columns. If that be the case, you can arrange to have your own matrix by putting in your own values, for which we'll see another program which has been done. Now look at this program. Since the user is going to give an input and this input is going to be read under a for loop, I have introduced the data input stream method, which will read values from the user. The system out.println asks the user to enter 9 values, which will be divided as 3 by 3 by using this array. And now it says for int I is equal to 0, I less than a dot length, that is this I plus plus for the rows, and a nested for the columns. And here, by using the for loop, I read the values that is being fed by the user. Then I display the matrix by once again using the same nested for loop, and I give system.out.println of a of I of j with the tab and of course this line. It's more or less just like the previous example. The only difference is that we get the input from the user. Shall we run this program? I compile this program. Yes, you can ignore that warning and execute the program. Now you see it's asking the user to enter the 9 values. Now let me enter the values. I entered the 9 values, and now you see that the first 3 values 27, 18 and 9 have been placed in the first row of the matrix. 36, 45 and 72 have been placed in the second row of the matrix, and 54, 63 and 81 have been placed in the third row of the matrix. So this is an example of a 3 by 3 matrix, but there are only 3 rows and 3 columns. You can increase the number of matrices, or you can increase the number of arrays by adding more subscripts. You can do this as an exercise just to have a feel of what will happen when you have 3 subscripts and when you have 3 for loops. Just try it out and find what the result is. You'll be amazed. In the session, we saw what 2-dimensional arrays were all about. We saw how to declare a 2-dimensional array, an example, and the sample program by which we saw how to create matrices by using nested for loops and arrays. So till such time we meet again, it's bye and thank you.